I hadn't been home for Christmas in 5 years. The drive back to my parents' house in Massachusetts felt longer than it should have. The highway glazed with sleet, the radio soft and hollow. I rehearsed small talk in my head, the way you practice breathing underwater, slow, unnatural, necessary. By the time I turned onto Hanley Drive, the houses glowed with gold lights, every window a postcard of warmth. Ours looked the same from the outside white siding wreath on the door, the illusion of harmony. Inside, it smelled of cinnamon and furniture polish. My mother, Linda, appeared at the doorway in a red sweater and pearl earrings perfect as ever. "Julia," she said, voice bright but brittle. "You made it." My father, Thomas, emerged from behind her glass of wine in hand. "Didn't think you'd brave the snow," he said, as though coming home required courage. I smiled. "It's Christmas Eve. Thought I'd risk it." Then came Veronica, my sister, 3 years younger, but always treated like royalty. She floated down the stairs in a glittering silver dress, her phone held up for a live stream. "Family is everything," she said to her followers before turning to me. "Oh my God, Jules, you're actually here!" The word actually hit like a slap. Around her neck shimmered a diamond pendant, probably gifted by her husband Aaron, or by my parents who adored spoiling her. The living room looked like a showroom, every ornament coordinated presents stacked neatly under the 12-foot tree. I noticed how perfectly curated everything was. Even the family portrait on the mantel had been updated. Veronica and her husband stood in the center arms around my parents. My spot was gone. I swallowed hard and set my coat aside. Dinner buzzed with conversation that revolved entirely around Veronica, her new sponsorship deal, her holiday vlog series, her busy life. I tried to contribute, but each time I opened my mouth, someone pivoted back to her. "Veronica's planning to start a podcast," Linda announced proudly, "about self-worth and success." My father chuckled. "Maybe she can teach Julia a thing or two about marketing herself." Laughter fluttered around the table. I smiled thinly and sipped my wine. After dinner came gifts. Veronica handed out boxes wrapped in gold ribbon luxury scarves for Mom, a watch for Dad, something sleek and expensive for every relative. When it was my turn, I handed my parents a modestly wrapped package. "It's something I worked on myself," I said quietly. My mother peeled the paper with careful fingers. Inside was a wooden frame, handcrafted and restored, holding a digitally remastered photo of their wedding day, the one that had faded years ago on their dresser. "Oh," Linda said after a pause. "How nostalgic." Thomas leaned closer, squinting at the image. "That old picture, I thought it was long gone." Veronica laughed. "A picture frame. That's so you, always practical." She tilted her phone toward the gift, whispering to her viewers. "You guys look at this retro vibes." The room erupted in polite laughter. My father chuckled and said, "Maybe next year kiddo gets something memorable." My stomach tightened. I glanced at the photo in my mother's lap. Something I'd restored pixel by pixel over weeks, hoping it might mean something. It looked smaller now, fragile. The chatter continued, a blur of voices and clinking glasses. No one noticed that my hands had gone still. Veronica leaned over. "Don't take it so seriously," she said with a smile that wasn't one. "You know how Mom and Dad love tradition. They just expect bigger gestures. Bigger gestures." The phrase lodged itself deep in my chest. For years, I had sent money quietly helping with their mortgage covering repairs, even bailing Veronica out when her candle business crashed. They had never called that a gesture. Only Veronica's glitter counted as love. My mother stood up, smoothing her dress. "Well," she said, glancing at my gift, "it's the thought that counts." My father added, "And the effort. You always did put effort into small things." The laughter that followed wasn't cruel, but it was enough to hollow the room. I looked at the reflection of the Christmas tree in the window, my own face faintly visible against the lights, smiling, nodding, pretending. That old ache, the one I thought I'd buried, rose sharp and clean. But under it, something colder settled. Clarity. I realized I had walked back into the same stage, same roles, same script. I was the quiet one, meant to absorb their applause for her. The difference was that this time I wasn't here to perform. I picked up my glass, drained it, and whispered to myself, "Merry Christmas." The wine burned down my throat like truth. When we were kids, everyone called Veronica the sunshine of the family. She had golden curls, dimples that appeared on command, and a laugh that made adults melt. I was the quiet one who took things apart to see how they worked. While she performed cartwheels in the living room, I sat in the corner with my Lego bridge models trying to understand why certain beams collapsed. Thomas, our father, loved showing her off. "That's my girl," he'd say when she sang at school events, his camera flashing like a spotlight. When I brought home straight A's, he'd glance at the report card and murmur, "Good. Keep it up," before turning back to Veronica's endless chatter. Linda would add softly, "You know your sister just needs more encouragement. You're strong enough to handle less attention." That became the family mantra Veronica needed. Julia managed. I learned early that praise was currency, and I didn't have the right currency to spend. At 16, I worked at a hardware store after school, saving for college. Veronica, 13, then got a new piano because music brings culture to a home. When she tired of lessons, the piano gathered dust a monument to her whims. I remember the night she dropped a crystal ornament and started crying. I offered to glue it back together, but Thomas barked, "You've done enough tinkering. Let your mother handle it." He hugged Veronica, soothing her tears, while I cleaned up the glass in silence. At 17, I got my first scholarship letter, a partial ride to a state engineering program. I rushed home, breathless, waving the envelope. Linda smiled faintly and said, "That's nice, dear. Did you tell your sister? She just got accepted into a dance camp in Paris." My father beamed at Veronica like she'd been chosen for sainthood. That night, I lay awake listening to their laughter downstairs, the sound floating up through the vents like static. In that moment, I learned that achievement meant nothing without charm, and charm was Veronica's inheritance. Christmas was always the hardest. When I was 13, I gave Dad a simple watch I'd saved for months to buy. Veronica, then 10, presented him with a toy airplane Linda had bought on her behalf. He lifted her gift with delight and said, "Now that's a real present." The words etched into my memory clean and permanent. He wore the airplane keychain for years, the watch forgotten in a drawer. Still, I tried. I kept showing up with thoughtful gifts, with help with effort. Each time, I was met with a kind of polite blindness, as if my existence filled a quota but never a heart. In college, I called home every Sunday. They often forgot to answer. When they did, Linda asked about Veronica's social life before hanging up with, "We're so proud of you too, sweetie. Too. Always an afterthought." When I graduated top of my class, no one came to the ceremony. My roommate's parents clapped for me out of pity. A week later, I got a card in the mail signed "Love, Mom and Dad" with Veronica's handwriting in the corner. "Congrats, Jules. Sorry, family trip." That card stayed taped inside my first apartment cabinet for years. Not as motivation, but as proof that I was on my own. The truth is, I didn't hate them then. I still believed families could change if you worked hard enough to earn their respect. I thought if I built something big enough, degrees, projects, a career, they'd finally see me. I was wrong. Love doesn't come as a reward. It's either there or it isn't. And once you realize that the silence that follows isn't pain anymore, it's clarity. After college, I moved to Boston with nothing but a duffel bag and a used laptop. I rented a basement studio that smelled like paint thinner and rain. The first months were brutal, long commutes, cheap noodles nights, where the only light came from my computer screen. Still, when Mom called to say Dad's business was going through a slow season, I wired them $2,000. "You shouldn't," Linda said sweetly, but she didn't refuse. A week later, Veronica posted photos from Cabo, a cocktail in hand, captioned "Family Vacation to Recharge Before New Projects." I stared at the screen, then at my balance, 214 left. I closed the app and kept working. A year later, Veronica launched her candle shop Serenity by V. She told everyone she was building a lifestyle brand, but I knew she hadn't paid off her student loans. One night, Mom called crying. "Your sister's overwhelmed," she said. "You're good with numbers, Jules. Can't you help her organize things?" When I looked at Veronica's business plan, I realized she'd mixed personal spending with store funds. "You can't buy luxury boxes before you sell a single candle," I told her. She rolled her eyes. "You engineers always think life's an equation. Some of us build beauty, not bridges." 2 weeks later, she called again. "The landlord's threatening to lock up the shop. I need a little help until I get investors." How much I asked, though, I already knew the answer would hurt. 5 grand, she said softly. Mom and Dad said you might. I sent the money. Not because she deserved it, but because I wanted peace. I thought maybe generosity could build a bridge where love never existed. Months later, the shop failed. Veronica deleted all posts about it and blamed the economy. I waited for a thank you text that never came. Instead, Mom phoned to ask, could you not bring it up? She's sensitive. That was the pattern my effort erased to protect her comfort. When Dad had knee surgery, I drove 3 hours after a full shift to drop off groceries and cook meals. Veronica came the next day, took a selfie beside his hospital bed, and captioned it, "Family first." The photo got hundreds of likes. I stood in the hallway outside his room unseen, listening to Dad tell the nurse, "That's my younger one. She's a sweetheart." I started keeping a mental ledger, not of money, but of silence. Every favor unacknowledged, every insult disguised as a joke. At work, I rose fast, projects, promotions, pay raises, but back home, my worth stayed frozen in time. I was still the serious one, the caretaker, the background character. When they needed someone to co-sign a small loan to refinance the house, Mom said, "You know, your sister can't risk her credit right now." I signed the papers without hesitation. 6 months later, Veronica leased a new car. Dad called it a reward for how hard she tries. I didn't ask what I was supposed to be rewarded for. Apparently, endurance didn't count. That night, I called Margaret, my old neighbor, the one who had watched me grow up. Her voice was steady, full of smoke and wisdom. "You can't fill a bucket with no bottom," she said. "Stop trying to pour yourself into people who never hold you." I didn't listen then. I still believed love was a project you could finish if you just built strong enough beams. What I didn't know yet was that some foundations were never meant to hold anything at all. It was the first week of December when my phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it until I saw the contact name Mom. I hadn't heard her voice in over a year. "Julia," she said softly, drawing out my name as if testing how it still fit in her mouth. "How are you, sweetheart?" That word, sweetheart, felt foreign. "Busy," I said carefully. "Everything okay?" There was a pause long enough for me to picture her pacing in that perfect kitchen. "Your sister wants to have a real family Christmas this year," she said. "She's been asking about you." I almost laughed. "Veronica, she's changed," Mom insisted quickly. "She's matured, and your father misses you too." I could almost hear Dad in the background muttering something about, "It's been long enough." Then Mom added, "You know, after everything you've done for this family, it's time we come together again." That last part made me blink. She never said thank you, not even then, but this sounded close, like bait wrapped in apology. I told her I'd think about it. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, scrolling through photos of my team's latest project. A seismic bridge design outside of Boston, the kind of work that saved lives but never made headlines. My apartment was small, but mine. Warm, quiet, safe. Going back felt like unlocking a door I'd welded shut. I called Margaret, who was now retired and living by the coast. Her voice came through steady as always. "They reached out, huh?" she said. "After all this time." "They said it's different now," I replied. "They always say that when they want something." She said, "You're not that little girl anymore, Julia. You can visit without losing yourself." I stared at the snow gathering on my windowsill, the city below blurred in gray light. "Maybe it's stupid," I murmured. "Maybe I just want to see if anything's changed." Margaret's tone softened. "Closure doesn't come from their apology. It comes from your clarity." I didn't decide right away, but over the next few days, I caught myself remembering fragments, the smell of pine needles, the crackle of the old fireplace, the way the snow used to silence the world. Nostalgia is a trickster. It paints overwrought and calls it home. On the 15th, I texted Mom, "I'll be there Christmas Eve." Her reply came fast, too fast. "Your sister will be thrilled. It'll be like old times." When I hung up, the quiet in my apartment felt heavier than usual. I thought about packing gifts, about what I could possibly bring that wouldn't be measured against Veronica's glitter. Then I saw the restored photo of my parents' wedding sitting on my desk, the one I'd framed myself after scanning and editing each crease. Maybe I thought this could remind them of something real. I wrapped it carefully in brown paper and tied it with twine. Simple, honest, like the love I still wanted to believe existed somewhere beneath the show. The Hanley house looked brighter than I remembered, almost theatrical. Every bush was wrapped in white lights, the windows glowed with gold garland, and a glowing reindeer stood at the walkway like a greeter outside a luxury store. I parked at the curb and sat for a moment watching my breath cloud the windshield. It was the same house I'd grown up in, yet it felt smaller somehow, like it had been staged for someone else's story. When I rang the bell, music and laughter spilled from inside. Linda opened the door, perfectly quaffed a glass of champagne, already in hand. "There she is," she said loud enough for the guests behind her to hear. "Our little engineer, back from the big city." Her tone made it sound like a novelty act. Thomas appeared next, his voice booming. "You made it. Your sister's been running herself ragged getting everything ready." He gestured toward the living room. "Come see what she's done." Inside, I felt like I had stepped into a catalog. White candles flickering on mirrored trays, polished ornaments that matched the walls. Veronica stood near the tree in a fitted emerald dress, giving instructions to a man adjusting her camera. 5 seconds, then panned to the tree, she said, then turned and saw me. "Jules," she squealed, hurrying over with open arms that stopped short of contact. "Wow, look at you. Boston suits you." I smiled politely. "You look festive." "Of course," she said. "I'm recording tonight for my holiday vlog. People love authentic family moments." She winked at me. Authentic! The word almost made me laugh. The house was filled with relatives I barely recognized. My Aunt Nora hugged me, smelling of expensive perfume. "Still in construction, dear." "Such hard work for a girl." I corrected her quietly. "Engineering." She nodded vaguely and turned to praise Veronica's decorating sense. I drifted to the fireplace. Above it hung a new family portrait, Mom, Dad Veronica, and her husband Aaron standing by a lake. My name wasn't missing, it was erased. Thomas called out, "Everyone glasses up!" He raised his wine. "To family, to success, to Veronica's incredible year." Applause filled the room. And to Julia, Linda added as an afterthought for being so independent. The phrasing made independence sound like loneliness. I clinked glasses anyway. The champagne was warm, the bubbles sharp. Dinner was served on the long oak table, a feast of roasted turkey glazed ham and dishes arranged like props. Veronica narrated the spread into her phone. A Hanley family tradition. When I passed her a dish, she whispered, "Could you move the bowl? It's blocking the shot." Between bites, they peppered me with polite curiosity. "You still working with computers?" Thomas asked. "Infrastructure systems," I said. "Bridges, buildings, earthquake resistance." "Ah," he said, uninterested. "Well, your sister's thinking of opening a wellness studio. Real estate and branding now, that's a growth market." Mom laughed. "Veronica has such vision." I sipped my wine again, letting the words wash over me. Every compliment for her carried an invisible weight pressed against me. I wasn't jealous, I was just tired. When the meal ended, Veronica insisted we gather by the tree for her vlog outro. "Come on, Jules," she said, positioning me beside her. The camera light flared, bleaching out the room. "We're so lucky," she said to the lens, smiling like a saint. "Family is everything." The camera beeped off. Her smile vanished. "Can you move?" "You're blocking the gifts." I stepped aside, hands cold despite the heat of the room. Everything was too polished, too bright, too fake. I realized then I hadn't been invited home to reconnect. I'd been invited back to decorate her story. After dinner, Veronica clapped her hands and announced it was time for presents. The room buzzed again with laughter, the faint hum of her camera light still flashing intermittently as if it refused to let the performance end. I sat at the edge of the couch, clutching the small package in my lap, brown paper tied neatly with twine. Simple quiet, almost embarrassing, next to the glossy silver boxes that shimmered under the tree. "Start with mine," Veronica chirped. She handed Mom a rectangular box wrapped in metallic gold. Inside was a designer handbag that gleamed like liquid metal. "Oh, sweetheart," Linda gasped, holding it high as if the room's approval could make it shine brighter. "It's perfect." "Real leather," Veronica said with a satisfied grin. "Limited edition." Then came Dad's turn. He unwrapped a sleek black box to reveal a Swiss watch. "For your meetings, Dad. You need something that says authority." He slipped it on immediately, tapping the face admiringly. "You always know what people need, honey." he said. A gift that means something. The line stung. I could already hear the echo of what would come later. When the applause quieted, Linda looked toward me. Julia, dear, did you bring something? I nodded and stood feeling every eye on me. It's for both of you, I said, handing her the package. The paper crinkled softly as she peeled it away. Inside was the frame their wedding photo I'd restored, colorized, printed on archival paper, and set in walnut wood I'd sanded myself. For a second, there was silence, real silence. Then Veronica let out a laugh that cut through the room like glass. Oh my God, she said, glancing around. A picture frame. That's so you. Thoughtful. The way she said thoughtful made it sound like pathetic. A few relatives chuckled uncertainly. Dad cleared his throat. Well, that's nice, he said, inspecting it like a product sample. Old photo, right? Linda set it on the coffee table. It's the thought that counts, she said. You've always been practical. The same word again weaponized. Veronica leaned back, sipping her champagne. Practical's good, Mom. Not everyone needs to sparkle. Her tone made it clear who she thought did. I felt the heat rise in my face, a pulse pounding behind my temples. I tried to focus on the tree, the lights blurring into halos. I thought it might remind you of your early days, I said softly, before everything got so busy. No one responded. Dad reached for another gift, already moving on. Let's keep things going, he said, voice too bright. Veronica started handing out more boxes. The laughter returned louder this time, as if to bury what had just happened. I sat still, hands clasped in my lap, watching the frame sit untouched amid ribbons and tissue paper. The moment stretched into something unbearable, too sharp, too humiliating to breathe through. I could feel the pitying glance of an aunt from across the room, the kind that said, "Don't take it so personally." Then Veronica twisted the knife. You know, Jules, she said, smiling, next year, maybe I can help you pick something. You've got great taste, just modest budgets. A few people laughed. Dad didn't stop them. Linda's smile froze tight as thread. Something in me snapped, but not loudly. It wasn't anger that filled me. It was a kind of cold focus, a stillness that felt cleaner than rage. I looked at Veronica and said evenly, You always did love expensive things. I guess we both give what we have. The words hung in the air like frost. Veronica blinked, unsure whether it was an insult. Dad cleared his throat again, the universal cue to move on. Someone turned the music up. The noise returned. But inside, everything in me went still. I looked at that frame one last time, the image of two young people smiling at a future they hadn't yet ruined, and realized I was done trying to earn space in their picture. The laughter faded around me, replaced by a distant ringing in my ears like steel under pressure. I smiled faintly, stood and whispered to myself, Merry Christmas. They didn't hear me. They never did. I didn't say anything more that night. The laughter in the room eventually softened into background noise, and I slipped away to the guest room that used to be mine. The door still creaked the same way when I closed it. The air smelled faintly of old carpet and perfume. Veronica's perfume, probably since Mom once told me she stored extra clothes in here. I sat on the edge of the bed, the one with the same floral quilt from high school, and let the silence stretch. I didn't cry. I just felt hollow, like the inside of me had been scraped clean. The photo frame had been a test, though I hadn't realized it until then. A quiet, final test to see if anything had changed, if my family had learned to see beyond shiny boxes and brand names. They hadn't. Maybe they never would. I glanced at my laptop bag on the dresser. Inside were blueprints for the seismic bridge project my firm had just finished in Seattle, a project that had earned us an award, and for me, a life-changing bonus. 2 weeks earlier, the board had offered me a promotion and equity partnership. 45,000 shares valued at nearly $500,000. I had signed the contract with shaking hands, then gone home and sat on the floor of my apartment until the reality of it sank in. I'd built my own empire, quietly beam by beam, line by line. Ethan Wells, an old friend from college who'd become a lawyer, had insisted I invest the bonus wisely. Buy something solid, he'd said. Something no one can take from you. I remembered his words a week later when I saw the listing for the Lake Ridge property, a small house overlooking frozen water 40 miles north of the city. It was weathered, needed care, but it was beautiful in a quiet, enduring way. I bought it outright. My first home, my sanctuary. The paperwork was finalized 2 days before Mom called. Maybe that was why I'd agreed to come home to see if owning something permanent could soften the ache of belonging nowhere. Now, sitting in that room full of ghosts, I realized the irony. The very people who taught me how to feel small had also trained me to build my own foundation. Every insult had become a blueprint, every slight a beam. Downstairs, I could hear Veronica laughing with Dad again, her voice sugar-coated for the camera. Family is everything, she repeated for her followers. I turned off the lamp and whispered to the dark. Not always. That night, I fell asleep thinking about Lake Ridge, the quiet water, the smell of cedar, the way the sunlight had hit the windows when I first stood there with the keys in my hand. It wasn't revenge I wanted. It was peace. But peace, I knew now, always came with a price. The next morning smelled like cinnamon and staged forgiveness. Linda was already bustling around the kitchen, her lipstick perfect, humming Christmas carols that sounded more like strategy than cheer. When I walked in, she smiled too brightly. "Coffee's fresh. Did you sleep well, honey?" she asked, sliding a mug across the counter. Her eyes flicked over my simple sweater and jeans. "You could wear more color, you know." "You fade into the background in photos." I bit back the reply, sitting on my tongue. Photos aren't really my priority. Veronica entered moments later, her robe trailing like she was floating down a runway. She carried her phone in one hand and a tablet in the other. "Jules," she said, her voice dripping sugar. "I was hoping to catch you before you head back." I set my mug down carefully. "What's up?" She perched on a bar stool. "Okay, so you know I'm launching a new brand, like a rebrand, really. We're moving into skincare. It's gonna be huge." She flipped the tablet toward me, mood boards, mock-ups, quotes about female empowerment over beige backgrounds. "I just need a little push to get started." I already felt where this was going. "A push," I repeated. "You mean money?" She laughed like we were old friends sharing an inside joke. "Oh, come on. You work with banks or something, right? You've got the connections." "Engineering," I corrected. "I build structures, not loans. Same thing, right?" she said, waving her hand. "You build stuff, I build brands." Thomas entered mid-conversation, tie already loosened, though it wasn't yet 10. "You two getting along?" he asked, patting Veronica's shoulder. "Your sister's got vision, Julia. You could learn from that. She's not afraid to take risks." "She's taken plenty," I murmured, but he didn't catch it. Veronica leaned closer, voice dropping. "Look, Dad and Mom are considering helping me out, but they said maybe we could co-sign something together. Family unity and all that." "You want me to co-sign a loan for your skincare brand?" I asked, my voice flat. She blinked, feigning innocence. "You make it sound so formal. It's just support, you know, like family does." I could feel Linda's eyes on me from the stove, pretending to stir sauce she wasn't watching. I said calmly, "I think you'll do fine without my help." "Wow," Veronica said, her smile tightening. "Didn't realize you were so cold now. Boston must have changed you." "No," I said. "It just clarified a few things." Thomas turned, irritation flaring. "Don't start, Julia. She's trying to build something. You should be proud your sister's got drive." "I am," I said. "I just prefer solid ground before I stand on it." He frowned. "You always overthink everything." "Not everything's a math problem." Linda finally chimed in, soft but sharp. "Let's not spoil the morning. It's Christmas Eve." Veronica sighed dramatically, grabbing her mug. "Forget I asked. Some people just don't believe in family." She swept out of the room, leaving her perfume behind like a taunt. The quiet that followed felt dense, full of unspoken rules. Thomas muttered, "You could be nicer." I didn't answer. Outside the kitchen window, snow was falling hard now, thick, relentless, beautiful. I watched it cover the driveway, thinking about foundations again, how weight distributes itself until weak beams crack. They had no idea I'd already built something stronger than their guilt could touch. When Linda finally broke the silence, her tone was the same one she'd used my whole life. "Your sister means well," she said softly. "She just doesn't know how to show it." I turned to her. "And you?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. By Christmas morning, the house was a blur of wrapping paper chatter and the shrill laughter that never seemed to stop. I stood by the window, coffee cooling in my hands, watching snow drift over the lawn. Everything outside looked pure and untouched. Inside, everything was performance. Veronica was glowing in a red silk dress, spinning her phone to show her followers the Hanley family morning. She'd just finished unwrapping a diamond bracelet from her husband and was busy holding it to the light when Mom gasped, "Oh, I almost forgot! We found the perfect place for our summer getaway." Dad perked up. "Yes, that lake property you showed me online, the one at Lake Ridge. Veronica said it's beautiful." The name caught me off guard. I turned slowly. Lake Ridge. Mm-hmm. Linda smiled. "We were thinking of renting one of the cottages for a week. Maybe all of us could go. Family bonding time finally." Veronica clapped her hands. "I already reached out to the realtor listed. The view is insane. We'll all relax, recharge, maybe film a little content." I felt my pulse in my throat. What address? She shrugged, scrolling through her phone. "I think it was 74 Crescent Way or something. It's right on the water. Do you know it?" My lips parted before I even realized I was speaking. "Yes," I said quietly. "I know it." Thomas chuckled. "You've heard of it. Must be nice up there. Prices are crazy now." Veronica grinned. "I told Mom maybe we could negotiate a discount. The listing looked new." I set my coffee down carefully, the mug clinking against the table. My heart wasn't racing. It was steady, deliberate, like the rhythm of something inevitable. "You won't need a discount," I said. "You'll need permission." Mom blinked. "What do you mean?" I looked at her directly. "Because I own it." The room went still. For the first time in my life, all their voices stopped at once. Thomas frowned, his brows knitting. "You what?" "I bought that house 3 weeks ago," I said, reaching into my bag. I pulled out the deed folder Ethan had told me to carry until the official copy arrived. "Lake Ridge, 74 Crescent Way. It's mine." Veronica let out a short laugh. "You're joking." "No," I said calmly. "You can check the property registry if you want." The silence after that was deafening. Even the ticking clock on the wall seemed to hesitate. Thomas leaned forward, voice rising. "You bought a house?" "Yes." "With what money?" Linda asked, her tone sharp with disbelief. "My own," I said. "From my job. We just finalized a major project with an international client. I got a significant equity bonus." "How significant?" Veronica asked, her voice cracking on the word. I held her gaze. 450,000 before taxes. Thomas's glass slipped slightly against the table. 400 and... What kind of company pays bonuses like that? "The kind that trusts me to design things that keep people alive," I said. Linda blinked rapidly as if trying to catch up. "And you didn't tell us. You didn't ask." For a long moment, the only sound was the fire popping in the hearth. Then Mom recovered first, her tone flipping from shock to sugary warmth. "Well, that's wonderful. We're so proud of you, sweetheart. You always were the quiet achiever." Dad nodded, forcing a laugh. "That's incredible, Jules. Maybe this will be a chance for all of us to spend more time together at the lake, huh? Family vacations again, just like old times." I smiled faintly. "I don't think so." Veronica's jaw tightened. "You're serious?" "Completely." She glanced at Mom, then back at me. "So, what, you just bought a lake house out of nowhere for what?" "To sit alone." "Maybe," I said. "Maybe to finally have somewhere that's mine." Thomas chuckled nervously. "Come on, don't be dramatic. Of course we'll all visit. Family property's family property." I shook my head. "No, Dad, that's exactly what it isn't." Linda's smile slipped. "You don't mean that. You wouldn't keep something like that from your family." "I didn't keep it from you," I said evenly. "I just stopped offering it." Veronica crossed her arms, her perfect nails glinting. "You've changed." "No," I said. "I just stopped apologizing for existing." The stillness that followed was electric, brittle as glass. For the first time, I didn't feel small in that room. I wasn't the forgotten child or the dutiful helper. I was the one with the deed in her hand and the power to say no. Linda looked down, her voice suddenly softer. "That house could bring us together, Julia. You could—" "Mom," I interrupted gently. "You had 30 years to bring us together. I built something instead." Veronica's lip curled. "Well," she said finally, "enjoy your empty lake house. Hope it keeps you warm." I smiled. "It already does." And for once, she had no reply. The shift in the room was almost visible, like the air itself had thickened. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Then, as always, my mother recovered first. She was an expert in emotional rearrangement. Her voice softened, syrupy and deliberate. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," she said again, as if repetition could make her pride sound genuine. "We're so happy for you." She reached out and took my hand lightly. And of course, family should share in happy things. Maybe we could all go up for New Year's. We'll bring food, help decorate, make it a Hanley retreat. My father nodded quickly, his salesman smile sliding back into place. Exactly. We've been meaning to get away from the city. It'd be nice to have everyone together again. I looked between them. These two people who had never visited me in Boston, who hadn't asked once about my life, my work, or even my birthday, and I felt something close to pity. They didn't see me. They saw opportunity. I don't think that's going to work, I said quietly. Mom's hand froze. Why not? Because it's not a vacation home. It's where I live now. Her smile faltered. Oh, come on. You can't mean that. You don't even have furniture yet. I have what I need. Dad leaned forward, tone turning stern. Julia, don't be unreasonable. This family's been through a lot. We need a place to reconnect. I met his eyes. You mean a place to take photos for Veronica's channel? Veronica laughed sharply. Wow, paranoid much. I was just trying to include you. Include me, I said, my voice flat. You spent last night laughing at my gift. Oh, for God's sake, she snapped. It was a joke. You're always so sensitive. It's exhausting. Mom sighed heavily, switching to the voice she used whenever she wanted to make me the problem. Julia, you have to let go of the past. Families tease. You've always taken things too personally. There it was, the gaslight I'd grown up under flickering so predictably I could recite the script. I didn't argue this time. I just smiled small and sharp. You're right, Mom. I should stop taking things personally. Dad relaxed a little, thinking I was backing down. Good. Now about that house, maybe we could plan a small renovation weekend. I can help with the deck and Veronica can handle interior design. She's got great taste. Deck, I repeated, tasting the absurdity. Dad, you don't even own a hammer anymore. He chuckled. That's what family's for, teamwork. Linda chimed in, desperate now. Yes, we can all contribute. You don't have to carry it alone. I looked at them and it hit me all at once. They weren't asking to visit. They were circling. The house wasn't just property to them. It was proof they hadn't failed, that their odd daughter had finally become useful. I think you're misunderstanding, I said finally. This house isn't for all of us. It's mine. Completely. Mom's eyes narrowed. Julia, don't be selfish. After everything this family has done for you, I laughed quietly at first, then louder until even Veronica's phone stopped recording. Everything you've done for me, I said. You mean the years I sent money you never mentioned, the repairs, the loans, the tuition payments for your golden child? You mean that kind of help? Dad's voice hardened. Watch your tone. I'm done watching it, I said. You all taught me silence equals peace. You were wrong. Silence just feeds people who mistake kindness for weakness. Veronica stood, cheeks flushed. You think you're better than us now? No, I said, meeting her eyes. I just finally know I'm not less. The stillness stretched long enough for me to hear the snow melting on the roof. Finally, Mom exhaled through her nose. You've changed, she whispered. Good, I said. That's what growing up is. I walked toward the door, picking up my coat from the rack. Behind me, I heard Dad say under his breath, You'll regret this. I won't, I said without turning. The words landed like truth. The morning after Christmas, I woke up to the sound of voices downstairs, low, urgent, like they'd been whispering all night, and finally gave up on hiding it. I lay still for a moment listening. She can't just cut us out, my father hissed. We've supported her for years. My mother murmured something I couldn't hear. Then Veronica. She's bluffing. She doesn't have that kind of money. Julia's always been dramatic. I got up dressed in silence and packed my bag. When I came down, they were all gathered around the kitchen table mid-conversation. The second they saw me, it stopped. The performance started again. Mom smiled. Good morning, sweetheart. Coffee? No thanks, I said. My voice was steady calm. I'm heading out soon. Leaving already, Dad asked, frowning. You just got here. I think we've said everything that matters, I replied. Veronica smirked. You mean all that melodrama last night? Please. You don't scare anyone, Jules. Something inside me clicked into place. I set my suitcase by the door, then turned back to them. You think this is about fear? Dad crossed his arms. It's about respect, young lady. You don't talk to your family that way. My family? I repeated. You mean the people who turned me into their personal safety net? Who laughed at me for years, then remembered I existed the moment I bought something worth coveting. Mom's voice sharpened. That's unfair, Julia. We've always been there for you. I reached into my tote and pulled out a thin folder, the same one that had traveled with me from apartment to apartment, state to state. I'd brought it for closure, though I hadn't planned to use it. Until now. You were there when it was convenient, I said, and I can prove it. I opened the folder and laid out the papers one by one. Bank transfers, loan receipts, copies of emails with dates circled. This is the $5,000 I wired to Veronica when her shop was failing. This, I tapped another page, is the money I sent when Dad's business slowed down. And this, I held up a printout, is the co-signed loan you promised to refinance on your own. I let the paper fall onto the table. I paid off the balance myself 2 years ago so the house wouldn't be foreclosed. The room went dead silent. Veronica's face went pale. You what? You didn't know, I said, tilting my head. Mom said not to mention it. She thought it might hurt your confidence. Linda's lips trembled. Julia, that's not... I cut her off. Do you want me to keep going? Because I can. I have every receipt. Dad slammed his hand on the table. Enough, he shouted. We're not criminals. We raised you, fed you, gave you everything. Parenting isn't charity, I said quietly. You don't get paid back for doing the bare minimum. He glared at me, veins rising in his neck. You think money makes you better than us? That it gives you the right to humiliate your own family? I met his gaze unflinching. No, the way you've treated me does. Mom began to cry, then soft at first, then louder, her hands pressed to her face. You're breaking my heart, she sobbed. I didn't move. I'd seen that performance too many times. Then maybe it's finally open, I said. For a moment, no one breathed. Then I gathered the papers, slid them neatly back into the folder, and slipped it into my bag. You taught me that love meant silence, I said. That being good meant being useful. But I'm not your project anymore. Veronica's voice rose sharp and defensive. You're just doing this for attention. You've always been jealous. I almost laughed. Jealous of what being adored for existing, I used to think your confidence came from being loved. Now I realize it comes from never being told no. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Mom stood abruptly, tears streaking her mascara. We made mistakes, Julia, but we did our best. Maybe, I said, but your best was conditional. Dad muttered something under his breath, something like ungrateful, but I was already at the door. As I pulled on my coat, I heard Veronica's voice again, shaking with anger. You'll regret walking away. I turned back my hand on the knob. You've been saying that my whole life, I said, and every time I regretted staying. I stepped outside into the cold. The air was sharp and clean, cutting through the residue of that house. Behind me, their voices rose accusations, guilt the same old chorus, but I didn't look back. The snow crunched beneath my boots as I walked to my car. For the first time in years, I felt tall. My breath hung in the air like steam, visible, undeniable. At the end of the driveway, I stopped just once to look at the house. It was beautiful in the way lies often our perfectly decorated hollow at its core. I whispered to myself, I'm done. And for the first time, the words didn't sound like escape. They sounded like peace. It took exactly 2 days for the phone calls to start. The first came from Mom, her voice trembling but still rehearsed. Julia, honey, we just want to talk. I hung up before she could finish. Then came Dad, angry, defensive, promising that I was tearing this family apart. Veronica followed with a single text. You've gone insane. Enjoy your empty house. I stared at it for a long minute before deleting it. By the end of the week, the silence between us wasn't new, it was restored. I returned to Boston and drove straight to Lake Ridge. Snow covered the porch railings like frosting. The lake was frozen still and endless. Inside, the house smelled of cedar and paint. I made a pot of coffee, lit the fireplace, and sat on the couch staring at the flames until dawn. The quiet didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Over the next few weeks, life settled into something steady again. Work thrived. My team finished a proposal for a new federal infrastructure grant, and for the first time, my name topped the leadership roster. Ethan called the day it was approved. I told you, he said, laughing. Solid investments, solid foundations. Foundations, I repeated softly. That's the word. He paused. You sound lighter. I am. Winter thawed slowly. By February, the lake shimmered like glass, and the roads turned muddy and alive again. I hadn't heard from my parents since that first week, but one afternoon as I reviewed site blueprints, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it, then answered. Julia, The voice was weaker than I remembered. It's Mom. For a moment, I didn't respond. The silence stretched. Are you okay? I finally asked. She exhaled shakily. Your father's been different ever since Christmas. He doesn't say much. Veronica and Aaron moved back in after their business folded. The house feels heavy. Her voice cracked. I wanted to say, I'm sorry. Those words had lived in my imagination for decades. Hearing them in real life was stranger than I expected. I didn't feel triumph, just a quiet ache. Sorry for what I asked. For not seeing you, she said. For letting your sister take up all the light in the room. For making you small so she could feel big. I closed my eyes. That's a start, I said softly. I don't expect forgiveness, she whispered. I just needed you to know that I see it now. I let the silence fill again before answering. I forgive you, I said. But forgiveness has walls, Mom, not doors. She inhaled sharply. What does that mean? It means you're forgiven, I said, but you don't get to walk back in like nothing happened. We can talk. We can rebuild something new. But the old house, we burned that down together. There was quiet on the line. Then she said, I understand. Before hanging up, she added softly, You remind me of your grandmother sometimes. Stubborn, strong. After the call, I sat on the porch for a long time, watching the sunset stain the lake in gold. It was Margaret who called later that evening, her gravelly voice as grounding as ever. Heard you stood your ground, she said. How's it feel? Strange, I admitted. Peaceful but strange. She chuckled. Peace always feels strange when you've been living in chaos. You'll get used to it. By spring, Lake Ridge had become more than a house. It became purpose. The quiet there gave me ideas. I started a mentorship program for young women in engineering, partnering with local universities. We met every other weekend at the house, the girls sitting cross-legged on the floor laptops, open eyes bright. They called me Miss Hanley at first. I told them to just call me Julia. A few months later, I officially launched the Hanley Women's Foundation with Margaret as honorary chair. We focused on giving women the same thing I'd fought my whole life for: recognition without condition. When the press release went out, Ethan laughed. You really named it Hanley. I did, I said. It's the name they used to make me feel small. Now it'll stand for something bigger. That summer, I hosted the foundation's opening at the house. Margaret stood beside me, proud and teary. You built peace, not revenge, she said quietly. That's real strength. The event drew people from across the state, engineers, students, mentors. But there was one face I didn't expect to see. Veronica. She stood at the edge of the crowd, thinner than before, her hair darker, her confidence dimmed. I walked over, unsure what to say. She looked down before meeting my eyes. Mom told me about the foundation, she said. It's incredible. Thanks. She swallowed hard. I wanted to apologize. For Christmas, for a lot more than Christmas. I studied her carefully. Why now? Because I finally get it, she said, voice trembling. The likes, the cameras, the attention, it's nothing. You built something real. I nodded slowly. And you can too, but it starts with honesty. Tears filled her eyes. Do you hate me? No, I said. I outgrew that. She exhaled. Can I come by sometime? Maybe help with the foundation, maybe I said. But this time you'll work for it. She nodded. Fair. We stood there for a moment, the wind lifting our hair, the lake glimmering behind us. For the first time, her silence didn't feel like manipulation. It felt like humility. Weeks later, a letter arrived in my mailbox, handwritten in my father's blocky script. I hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single photograph, the old wedding picture I had restored, framed again, the glass replaced. Beneath it, a note. You fixed it better than we ever could. I didn't cry. I just placed it on the mantel beside a small brass plaque that read, To build is to heal. That evening, Ethan arrived with 2 glasses of wine. To boundaries, he toasted. To beginnings, I replied. As night fell, I stood at the window and watched the lights of the lake shimmer in the dark. The house was quiet, the air clean, the world finally mine. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to earn love that should have been freely given. Now I built it differently, through purpose, through peace. And as the fire crackled, I whispered to the empty room. Some gifts come wrapped in cruelty. You just have to open them carefully.